the report. May we turn to item 8, Paul, the consolidated month for financial report.
Thank you, Malcolm. So the report you have in front of you shows the financial position as it was round about a month ago, in the quirky nature of just the deadlines of this board meeting and the reporting process. Intriguingly enough, I get the answers for the latest estimates and year-to-date tomorrow morning, which I will share with you obviously as soon as I have the opportunity. As it says in the paper, we've got a major stock take planned on the back of the numbers that I get tomorrow, with the exec team meeting on the 1st of October to have a thorough root and branch look through the numbers as they're emerging, the trends, and where necessary the mitigations that we need to take to bring things back into line in a year which, as Simon has already said, is looking very challenging, certainly for the commissioning sector, but even more challenging, I think, for the provider sector. So having a real handle, a real grip on all of this stuff early in the year, relatively speaking, for the NHS is quite an important thing. But for all of those reasons, I suggest the board treats the numbers that are presented in this report with a degree of caution, because they are out of date. And as you know, we've done quite a lot of work now to get the predictive capability in finance slightly sharper by looking at some of the future kind of predictive trends, both in governance of finance and in some of the cost spend trends. I am slightly concerned that this may be showing, in particular around CCGs and one or two of our direct commissioning teams, a more favourable picture than we will be looking at when I see the numbers tomorrow morning. But we'll see where that takes us to. As you know, our primary objective in the commissioning sector is to live within the magic number which is shown at the bottom, either Appendix A, if you like, detail, if you like, less detail, it's in Table 1. So the 101,167,000,000, to be overly precise, that we have available at the level of the non-ring-fenced revenue expenditure limit, which is what we are predominantly held to account for as the core performance metric. You'll see in those two tables that as at month 4, there were no significant year-to-date variances, and there were actually few CCGs or direct commissioning teams that were at month 4 predicting significant variances from their plans for the year. So in these numbers, at least, there are just two significant issues to draw to your attention. One of which is a technical one, which is the mismatch in our depreciation budget, which I've explained before, which does lead us to have underspend on depreciation, which we can't count towards our main performance metric. That's a shame, because it's money that we can't deploy behind the things that we would want to spend it on. It comes through as the negative at the bottom of the table. The second thing, which I talked about last time and don't propose to go into any further today, is the Cancer Drugs Fund. 70 million overspend predicted for this year against an already increased budget for the year. As you know, we've taken action in recent weeks to correct by a reprioritisation process for the Cancer Drugs Fund, but because of the length of time that these things take to impact and the protections that are in place for existing patients within the Cancer Drugs Fund, the impact on the overspend for 15-16 is very small. So those are the two major things that figure in the month 4 numbers, leading to that overspend of 85 that you can see at the bottom of the table. As you know, at the same time we do the core forecast, we look carefully at the risks attached to that position and the mitigations that we've got available, either in the form of corrective action that we can deploy or reserves, contingencies that can be used. At the time of the month 4 forecast, these were indicating a net risk, as I've set out in the report, of a further 183 million on top of that 85. So as we come into month 5, the starting point is that we've got at least 268 million of corrective action to take, even if there are no trends within month 5 which take us in the wrong direction. So lots of work to do across the commissioning sector to live within our core spending limit, even before we think about the wider concerns around the financial position in the NHS at large. This is, of course, a significant challenge for us for the very reason that our operating plans for this year were set exceptionally tightly. So there aren't significant reserves sitting there waiting to be deployed, especially in specialised commissioning, where we had to keep very tight budgets in order to meet the affordability criteria, and a number of CCGs where from the start of the year it's been very clear that they are less resilient less able to cope with shocks than their counterparts elsewhere in the country. So we'll work very hard on that. I do anticipate when I come back to the next board meeting being able to report that we have substantially closed the gap of 268 million that you get if you combine the forecast with the attendant risks. But I say so with anticipation that we're going to have done a lot of work, hard work with CCGs and with partners in the provider sector in order to do that. That's probably all I want to say at this stage, because it'll be more interesting when I've got the more up-to-date numbers in a day or two's time.
Thank you, Paul. Moira.
Thank you, Malcolm. Paul, paragraph 3.6 on QUIP. Last year we achieved a delivery rate of 87%, and this year we are forecasting 95%. What have we done in the system to enable that higher level of delivery?
Well, I guess you're comparing a current forecast to an actual from last year, so there's a slight moral slight hazard in my answer to your question. But I do anticipate that we will be better this year in terms of delivery of QUIP, predominantly because we spent a hell of a lot of time in the planning process, as we've discussed at various committee meetings before, subjecting the QUIP plans to pressure testing, making sure that in the interaction between our local teams and CCGs there was the maximum possible sharing of best practice, etc. So I think we have, broadly speaking, a stronger set of QUIP plans coming into this year than we've had in previous years, but there is no denying that it is a difficult set of things to do. Remember also the QUIP plans are very closely correlated with activity planning and grip on activity, and again, as we've discussed at previous meetings here, we were very much more how can I put it, interventionist, if I can put it that way, in the activity plans that CCGs have set this year, and indeed specialised commissioning is set for this year, because we have learnt the lessons from previous years where that was overly ambitious, if you like, in terms of the correction factors that can come in. So I think there is reason to believe that we have a better grip on it this year than in previous years. I hope I will still be saying that when we get to month 12.
I'm just going to underline one fact for the board that that is implicit in what both Barbara and Paul have said, but perhaps hasn't shone through quite as strongly, which is a small ray of sunshine, which is that the emergency activity growth in the first 4 months of this year has continued to be more modest than the average for last year. So I think the figure is that we've seen emergency admissions growth of 0.7% compared with the 2.3% that CCGs have funded capacity in providers. Obviously, we don't know how that will play out for the year as a whole, but it does imply that the deceleration in growth that we saw in emergency activity towards the end of the last financial year has been sustained into the first 4 months of this year, and obviously that is good news from the point of view of both provider capacity, finances and CCGs.
Paul, thank you very much. We note the report with all the caveats that you've identified for us, and we will follow it closely, obviously, at future meetings. Thank you very much for that.